It's like sometimes the best content is gonna get lower views, but it's more niche and more targeted. So like you're solving like a more advanced problem that is like very specifically solved by your product, and it's only going to be targeting like 100 people, but those 100 people are going to be like really, really good use cases for you. I have so many friends in Dev Rel who have like 20 followers on Twitter or what, like on YouTube, like, don't have a YouTube or like online presence at all. I think it's a misconception because people see us, and I think that they think that you need to be like loud to do that. Yeah. What would you like? What do you look for if you were gonna hire a junior DevRel person tomorrow? What kind of things would you be looking for?
Number one thing that I go look for is, can I find them online?
Yeah, I mean, I always Google first, of course.
You know, like
exactly.
I mean, so I've hired a couple of DevRel people with very limited experience, just based on what I could find in GitHub and YouTube. Like I've said to recruiters, like, I'm going to hire that person right there without even interviewing them. A exciting episode of the Hacking Open Source Business podcast. But the business partner that I have here, Avi, is not here. So it's just me. I am the solo host with Joe Karlsson joining me. Hi, Joe. How you doing today?
Hi. Thank you for coming to me, and Avi will be missed. But you will for sure make do for this amazing little podcast. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problems. No problems. It's always great to hear from you. A globally ranked DevRel personality.
Is there a ranking?
There's a ranking. You didn't know that you appear in a ranking?
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah. So hold on a second. I'll find what rank you are. I didn't know if people know this. There is actually a website that ranks DevRel people.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. You know, that's interesting. I have to say, like, it like hits like my lizard part of my brain that validates my work a little bit. Especially, so audience members who may not know, I recently was like laid off and recently just got hired on a new DevRel role. But I always getting laid off always makes you question your like your ability to do your work, you know?
Yeah.
And times are tough right now. It's fine. I didn't take it personally, but yeah.
Well, I think right now the world has changed so much, right? Just even lately, we've had a lot of changes across the tech landscape, where a lot of people have gotten laid off. A lot of people are reevaluating what they're doing. I just chatted with someone also in the DevRel space yesterday who said that they had to postpone conferences because they, so many people were saying we can't travel because we're laying off people, and so they put a moratorium on travel. So it's a crazy environment. And Joe, I'm glad you were able to find something. And there's a lot of people out there who are still looking. Any advice for them?
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about bringing that up. Obviously, engineering's been hit really hard. DevRel is notoriously a expensive business unit that is sometimes hard to justify our value. And I've been thinking a lot about like what I need to change professionally in order to like not risk getting laid off again. And I think that a lot has changed, right? The hog is dried up a little bit. I feel like for me personally, the things I'm trying to do are trying to integrate myself more fully inside the organization and trying to partner more internally. And so like that means like with sales, marketing, engineering, and like trying to show your value internally a lot better. So like telling that story. And the other thing too, I think, is really focusing on quick wins as well. So like we need to be showing like returns or some movement of the needle somehow, and I think that we have to be less like squishy about the work we're doing too. So like I'm just trying to be more like data driven and communicate better internally.
Well, I think that's always good, and you want to up your presence even when you're looking for a job. You still want to be writing or be active on social. You want to show that you have a presence. I think that's really good to continue to do that. But also, it's about bridging that gap between the developer side of things and the business side. And I think that actually brings a lot more relevance, because one of the things that I'm really worried about from a DevRel perspective is it's hard to show ROI in a lot of cases, right? From a business perspective, how do you tie what you're doing in the community to actual dollar outcomes that's driving the business forward? There's a lot of trust that happens, but sometimes that's the first thing to go, right?
Yeah, and Matt, I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that too, but I'll give my 2 cents on it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on like how to show ROI in DevRel right now, or like in developer marketing. But for me, it's not about like, I for sure track things like conversions, like how many people converting to free or paid tiers for my content, like number of hits and clicks and that sort of thing too. But I feel like the biggest thing for me is just like output consistency, because I think I have a good hunch on like what's going to do well or not do well. But like at the end of the day, stuff I can't predict is going to do well and like take off, and stuff that I think is going to do well, it's just absolute bombs. The key for me is just like to like make things consistently, and then tracking secondarily like all of the performance metrics you'd expect around like how engaging your content is or whatever. I don't know. How are you tracking that these days?
So I think that there's a couple different things, right? So the first one is the closer you can get to actual users that are either entering the ecosystem because of your activities, or you can tie directly to new people that you are reaching to. That's the important thing. Obviously, the nurturing of the existing community is critically important. But depending on the company, there's a lot of times when you have a community team that's focused on the nurture side. And from a DevRel perspective, a lot of the activities that I typically see are more externally focused to get people interested, to get them inspired, to have them try new things, and bring new people into the ecosystem. So I've been working quite a bit with trying to track which parts of my content are actually driving eyeballs to either the website or even signups or downloads. So, if I can track, like I was at FOSDEM this year. And at FOSDEM, we launched a new website and we had like a couple hundred people who visit the website. Well, that's purely based on what I did, right? Because it's like a new website. No one else knows about it. I went to this conference. I told people to go to it. They did. Yeah. But I'm also exploring using, links that can be tracked. So whether you use Bitly or, other things, I'm using our own tool, Scarf, you can see how many people are clicking on those links. And so if you use those to shorten your links, and as you start to provide content on social and everything else, you can start to track, these people are engaging with it. Because what I've also found is Twitter and LinkedIn lie about the number of clicks that you get.
Yeah, I know they all have like an incentive to lie a little bit. And you're like, that doesn't feel right, but okay, sure.
Yeah. And I think that's where it's definitely a little different. Working across the different social channels. Some do things better than others. But I think that's really the ultimate thing is how do we prove that we're driving additional people to enter the community and the ecosystem? We want to grow and expand the ecosystem and make sure those that are in the ecosystem are happy and content. Yeah. But when we talk about community, too many people think contributors first and not those users. And that's what drives me nuts.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, it feels like it's like yeah, I 100% agree. I totally agree with you on that. And I get the business like wants to like push on that too, but like I feel like you have to nurture those users.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And I think that users and customers are not the same thing, by the way. That's a key thing, right? So from a business perspective, any business that's a commercial entity that's trying to commercialize any sort of technology, whether it's open source or not, they want customers from a business perspective. Whereas, from a DevRel or a community perspective, we're more on the users. Yeah. Right?
And are you defining that like a free tier user versus a paid tier?
So, yeah, well, paid, I mean, you can view any sort of user as a customer if you want to view it that way. But ultimately, there's kind of this divide, right? I think that's where the divide needs to be kind of like crossed over, where you've got the divide of the free, the open source people. Let's say, you're downloading, software, you're using it, you're not paying anything. You don't know who those people are necessarily. That's where DevRel tends to start, right? And from a sales perspective, sales is like, well, I just want to turn those people into paying customers. Yeah. And that's where that kind of alignment needs to happen and needs to get better at, right?
I totally agree. So it's like, are you saying like it's like folks who are like, I don't know, like lurkers or pre-sign up or pre-trying it? Like it's like just kind of.
Well, so think about like, you worked at MongoDB, right? So there were probably, I'll just throw out some obtuse numbers.
Yeah.
Like there's 1 million people who use MongoDB. We'll just say there's 1 million people. Okay.
Yeah.
There's 5,000 customers.
I see.
There's 999,000, or 995,000 non-paying customers or users, right?
Yeah.
And so adding people to that is important. I actually gave a talk on this, at FOSDEM at the community track. Let's see. I think I got a neat slide on this too. Let's see.
Ooh.
Look at
Slides,
this.
the perfect medium for a podcast.
Yes. Well, so we're also we do video, so people can watch on video too. So
Good.
There you go.
I won't pick my nose. Good.
You can if you want. It could generate some views, right?
Yeah.
We're all about the extra views.
Yeah.
So let's see. So, geez, look at this. What did it do? The window, and so here's one of the slides that I've got here. So hopefully you can see that. Maybe it's.
I can.
Okay. Well, anyways, whatever. You can see it. Alrighty. So this is where there's like this kind of like divide, right? So you've got active contributors, code contributors, Slack users, all this stuff. And then you've got the business side, which is totally into the number of customers, the ARR, the expansion. Like there's these two sets of metrics that are not necessarily aligned with one another. Right.
Yeah.
And I like these two, like, little graphs at the top, because it's like the business folks versus the woohoo, we're gonna get crazy here, folks. And not to say that DevRel people can't be, the serious, but there is this kind of like difference.
Yeah.
That people.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree, and it's either like about like helping other like marketing and sales understand how these help them, or like I've been in orgs too where you have to like kind of just protect those numbers too, or like have like prevent sales and marketing from smothering your community and growth and Slack growth and like just community growth in general, which I've also had to like put my foot down and kind of do too. I feel like it's a little bit of both. Like we're advocating for the developers, and we're helping kind of like internally kind of sell these like concepts of how this helps them. And protecting them.
Yeah, and I think that from a standpoint of like how most business folks think that this is going to work is like we've got the influencer marketing. So Joe, by the way, Joe, you are number 37. Look at that. You're number.
If I had to rank myself, 37. I would not.
Look at that.
I would not have put myself that high. That is.
You are number 37 on the Dev Rel developer advocate top 100 influencers in Dev Rel. So just an FYI, you have you've got to live up to the reputation.
Yeah. I guess so. There's some great people on this list too. That's amazing.
Yeah. So there you go. But so here's the thing, right? So as an influencer, you are this influencer over here, and the expectation from a company perspective is you're going to generate a certain number of followers who are then going to watch you. And of those who are watching you regularly and subscribing to your content, they're going to start trying and doing whatever you tell them to do. And then from that, the expectation is those will eventually turn into a sales perspective. Yeah. Right. And so if and how I tend to look at DevRel perspective is my job from a developer advocate perspective, if that's my role, is to create other external evangelists who will go out there and do what I do and help amplify the audience. Because Joe, even though you're voted number 37, you only have the ability to reach so many people, right?
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yep.
So let's say you have an audience that's 10,000 people. That's still a drop in the bucket.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So if you can get 10 other people who also have an audience of 10,000, that's going to scale more, right? And so that's what this is. Anyways,
actually, I've been thinking about this a lot too, because like I totally agree. I don't have like a massive following or anything, but like if I wanted to, like my personal growth goals are aligned with the business a little bit too, and I feel like a big part of like my personal strategy recently has been doing like partnerships, like jumping into existing communities too, and like kind of helping facilitate those.
Like partnerships are a big deal.
My personal goals for like growing my audience are aligned with like the company I work for's goals for like growing their audience and their sales or whatever too. And a big part of like how I've been doing that is through partnerships, like just meeting with existing communities or exist. I mean, there's a million conferences or like product specific stuff or just like programming language communities, but like getting involved with those, I think is really in a meaningful way. I'm sure you and I know, and everyone that's listening is like has been to like people on partnerships are just come in and just try to do a sales pitch or whatever. And that's like a massive turnoff. I can like think of keynotes, like paid keynotes I've been to at some big conferences. That just,
Paid keynotes are the worst.
Yeah. I totally agree. It just like feels like a sales pitch, and like it shows like a lack of understanding of how to partner with those communities.
By the way, when I was in charge of the conference at Percona, so we did the Percona Live, I banned like paid for keynotes.
Yeah.
Like I'm like,
good for you.
Like it's just ridiculous. Nobody wants them. So
you kind of have to do it to protect the community, and I get it. Like pays the bills, and that's really helpful too. And like, I know some companies do a great job of that too, of like getting a paid slot and like helping teach the community in like a respectful, non-salesy way. And by the way, there's like, I use the word salesy, and there's nothing wrong with selling it. It's just, I think we have a problem with bad selling that ends up just coming across as like unhelpful.
I'm going to put on like I have a sales hat, by the way. It's my, if you like,
evil supervillain. That is good.
This is my business hat. I wear this whenever I talk business.
When we love salespeople, they do a really hard job, and we're like helping them out. It's everyone wins, but yeah, it sucks when it like comes down to just like pure bad sales tactics at a conference.
Well, and so I think that not all sales are created the same, and I think that depending on how you approach the community, there's a organic kind of like sales pipeline and the ability to tap in. And a lot of people talk about like the product growth flywheel. I don't know if you're familiar with the product growth.
I am not. No, it sounds. I like that word flywheel.
Okay, so here again, we'll slide up this. Shall we slide this up? Not that I am like trying to do a slideshow here, but when we talk about like this, it's could be a little harder to read. It could be.
A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
I get it.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
I know. Isn't that the worst? He's making the screen bigger for a slide, but on Google Slides, what it does, it just like makes the header smaller. It makes the actual slide smaller. So opposite what you want.
So anyway, so let's see. So here we go. This is my really shitty graphic. Okay, so I am not a graphic designer, but this is the open source flywheel. But you could find it like if I go search for like product growth flywheel, I'll probably find a better example. Let's see, product growth flywheel.
Ooh, nice clicky keyboard.
Oh yes, love the clicky keyboard. So let's see. So images. Let's pull up. Look at this. We've got the product growth flywheels. They're all over the place. How about the HubSpot one? There we go. So let's go ahead. We'll open this in a new tab. Open up the new image in a tab. There we go. Look at that. Way beautiful. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? All right. Beautiful. So the idea is, from a growth perspective, what you have to do is attract people, then engage them, and then delight them. And so as you do that, those strangers who are attracted will become prospects who will start to look at your stuff, and then they'll become customers, and then they'll eventually promote you, and then it will become this kind of like cycle that continually propagates itself.
Yeah. I love this. Can I say too, like, so I'm a content focused developer advocate. I make videos and podcasts, whatever. But my biggest thing I'd say to like get people like closer to the center of the flywheel is to teach, not sell.
Yes. Helping will sell. Selling will not help.
Yes. And can I give an example? I love to, like, imagine you're at home on Facebook and you have a friend, a realtor friend, and every day they're just posting a new listing they're trying to sell on the market. Like, I don't know about you, Matt, but I'm going to unfollow that person so quickly. And for me, like, but imagine that same person, right? And instead of like just posting their listings every day and trying to sell those that way, they're making like videos or blog posts talking about like, here's how the market's changed. Here's how my predictions for the next 5 years for the local, I don't know, San Francisco market or whatever, wherever they're located. Or like, hey, I helped this person selling the house renovate their bathroom and it increased the value of their home by $15,000. And here's the step-by-step of how they did that. Like, that's like engaging content that's helping me. And it's something I might actually end up sharing, and I'm like less likely to just unfollow or check out from.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a balance there, though. Even that stuff, if you do too much of it, can cause issues.
I totally agree. Yeah, right. If they're doing so much content posting that they're not even talking about any of their listings at all, that is also an issue. But even for me too, sometimes I even use it's like a balance of content, like keeping people engaged, but also like talking about it. I know James Franco's canceled now, but like back in the day, he was like the selfie king, and he said that he used to like use his selfies to engage content, or, like users to like follow his art and his poems and that sort of thing. But he was like balance his art that no one really cared about with his like selfies, which people like super engaged with. And I feel like it's a little bit with like businesses too, right? Like we need to like keep the end goal of like making money in mind, but we also like need to like kind of balance that with like more fun content or things that people actually are going to find value from.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is the balance is key. Now, there's some arbitrary numbers that I have heard from quote unquote experts that say, like, you know, for every piece of like self-serving content, you should have 4 or 5 pieces of something else.
Yeah.
Right. Now I've heard that 3 to 1, I've heard that 4 to 1, I've heard that 5 to 1. Pick your poison, but the idea is you should be sending more out that is not really specifically focused on your sales pitch than you are, you know, trying to sell.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And it depends on your audience, and it depends on where you're at, and I think that involves testing to figure that out, which you should do, right? Like, I don't know. I like my content strategy involves a lot of just like kind of trying stuff out and seeing what works. And like, yeah, like if people are engaged with it, cool, keep like working in that direction. If not, don't, you know?
Yeah.
And actually, and I was talking about this before we started recording too. I have this like soft idea I've been like trying to work out, but about like treating like open source content development like an open source project. Because Matt, like one of the biggest things I've seen people struggle with like working with this flywheel and getting people engaged too is like, it's a lot of like companies building features or content for things that no one asked for, which I'm sure you've seen a million times. I've seen a million times. Yeah, like, and some executives got an idea and they're like, build this. But like, for us, we have the advantage of like having a close relationship with a community of users who are like using our product or like using similar products, and like going to them and just asking like, hey, what do you guys need to see? Or like, what are you guys struggling with? And I usually like provide like some like options for them to kind of choose from. Like, I'm thinking about this, or this. Which one do you care about? And to work in that direction. Yeah.
And what's hard though is not everyone is at the same spot. And I think where I've seen some people really struggle is when they're looking at like smaller, you know, like communities or communities that are less engaged. You know, you've still got to, you know, like push the limits of what you're doing and try different things. But in a lot of cases, you might not have the audience to necessarily ask. So it's a lot 100%. More trial and error early on, right? And that can be scary. I can tell you that, you know, from my perspective, the audience, you know, the current company that I'm at, we're relatively small. We're a startup, right? And so, you know, we've got a growing list of people who use our software, but it's not a huge, you know, list. And our target audience is like founders and executives at these companies. So, you know, if there's, let's say we've got, you know, how many open source companies are out there in the world? Let's just say that there's 10,000. I don't know. I'm just going to throw 10,000 out there. You know, they might each have 100 people, but there might only be like 2 executives at those companies that really care about like the growth and the things that we're, you know, talking about and pitching. And it's not to say that everyone couldn't care about it. It's just that those who are like really willing to engage might be a smaller audience. And
oh, totally. And founders tend to be more like super busy people who aren't just going to spend 5 minutes answering a poll question on a random Slack channel they joined 3 months ago.
Yeah, and I've talked to some people about this, which is funny because like, you know, they're like, you know, like I talked with Gabe Weiss from Google a year and a half ago, and he was talking about how, you know, even like internally, so, you know, he'll do a video or he'll do content and it's like, oh, it's got, you know, 2,000 views, and you know, the folks there are like, you only got 2,000 views. What the hell's wrong with you? You know, like you know, all of our Google content has 1 million views. Why does yours only have 2,000? He's like, because the database audience is so much smaller, or it's so different, and so I think that it's hard to sometimes compare yourselves to other people in the space and then feel like maybe you're not doing a good enough job, or maybe beat yourself up a little bit like that, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, it's hard to be like in the open to not compare yourself. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. And I agree. I just started a new role at Tinybird. Again, it's a database company too, which I agree. Definitely more niche. Yeah, it's a new company, right? So it's got a smaller audience. It's new in the US. So like, yeah, trying to like grow that can be really hard too. And I agree. And I think that gets to a point too about like data, like how big your sample size to start taking data seriously. And again, this is more like an art than a science. I don't have any numbers around this, but like for me personally, like small communities, it was like you can get insights into like page views and that sort of thing too. I don't think you're not getting meaningful data to like actually glean anything too useful. So like getting too stuck on like this blog post didn't perform well, that doesn't mean that strategy won't work or like abandoning it. It's like trying to take it in like a grain of salt to maybe evaluating other things or trying it out for like 6 months even and seeing if it works or not.
Yeah, and so I actually so when you talk about blog posts, this is an interesting topic, and where you're looking at this content, right? So obviously different audiences, different sizes. Yeah. So when I was working at Percona, we had about 300,000 viewers of the blog every month. It's a pretty decent size, right?
Yeah.
But what was
good.
Yeah, what was funny was the blog there. It would have some content that would get like 20,000 views in the first like 3 days. And then there would be other ones that only got like 100 views in the first, few days. So, being the, crazy person that I am, I actually, we made a contest for all of our engineers and people who were writing content where we would give them a championship belt at the end of the year if they had like the highest ranked or the highest viewed content. But how we phrase this is there's two different ways to do this, which is the first 30 days worth of views and then versus the entire year's worth of views from a consistent basis. Because there's two types of content, in my opinion, when you're writing blogs. The first one is really about making sure that you have that pop, that initial kind of like, oh my God, we need to go get this. It's the Hacker News effect, right? So we wanted to get this on the first page of Hacker News, and then you'll get like 25,000 views in like one day. But then there's the other ones which are for SEO purposes or for people who are actually searching for a solution.
Yes.
And you know what? Those trickle in.
Yeah.
But those trickle in ones are sometimes worth more than that Hacker News pop, right? Because when, like you have a topic like, how to beat the system on an AWS and reduce your bill by 50% or whatever. I mean, like, I'm just going to throw that out there. You throw that out there and maybe like somebody at Hacker News goes, wow, that's awesome. What's that going to necessarily do for your company? Unless you are Corey Quinn and your whole company's about saving, money on AWS, right? Probably not going to do a lot. But it's interesting. It will get people to take note. They'll know who your company is. They'll check out that content. But they're not going to necessarily go to your database company, for that. But if you have how do you deploy this using Node.js and, JSON objects, blah, 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 and people are actually searching for that as a solution, then that is probably going to generate a higher conversion rate to actually become a user than that higher pop content.
Yeah, it's like your product is showing itself as a problem. Yeah, and I've seen a lot too, like an engineering team will like change some process that makes their engineering process better, but it's not related to your product at all. So people are coming for like, if you're a database company, they come for your like CI/CD content. It's like, okay, that's cool and interesting. And it's, I think that's definitely a good awareness play, especially if you're like looking to kind of just grow your name a little bit. But you're right, it's not going to lead to like bottom dollar. And you need both. You need both. I think you need both. I definitely would focus more on the long tail content. I think in terms of like, if you can make a piece of content that is useful for the next 3 to 5 years, like that's a great return on investment. And like, it's actually solving some real problems.
Yeah.
And I was going to say one other thing too about the total views on content too, is like sometimes the best content is going to get lower views, but it's more niche and more targeted. So like you're solving like a more advanced problem that is like very specifically solved by your product, and it's only going to be targeting like 100 people, but those 100 people are going to be like really, really good use cases for your
so this is where I'm starting to evolve my thinking, and this is like a difficult problem to solve, but it is not impossible.
Yeah.
And this is where I've been experimenting quite a bit is those views. I want to know how many of those views are from people who actually tried or used my software.
Yeah.
And that conversion ratio The guess is on the ones that have 100, the conversion ratio from those who view versus and try is probably going to be higher.
Yeah.
And so I've been experimenting with that internally on some of our content and some of the other things we're doing, which is kind of cool, right? Because I mean, like, obviously, like, you know, hey, it's great, I got 10,000 views, but if those 10,000 views, none of them became customers or users, or, you know, just read it and said like, yeah, this is mildly interesting. That's different than if you have 100 people who read it and say like, that is spectacularly awesome.
Yeah. That's been like a part of my like kind of post-tech weird market thing too, is like focusing more on 102 or 201 type content, more like intermediate to advanced content. I feel like most companies, like, there's a ton of content for like getting into whatever market segment you're in, but like I feel like products are going to be differentiated on their advanced features. So I feel like I'm like trying to lean into like more advanced subjects more like recently, like digging in a little bit further, which has been a shift personally for me.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, sometimes you've got to make that, you know, like shift, right? You know, sometimes you have to look at that, and I think that, you know, like, so what I was talking about here. Let me. So
you got a slide?
I have an image. I have an image for everything. Okay, I have an image for everything. So yeah, so this is my. I just made a blog specifically to talk about like the reason you should be tracking, you know, production users. So Joe, like, you know, this is a classic usage problem. And by the way, this is not, so those listening, this is not, you know, me trying to promote my content. This is just happens to be Joe, like throwing me softballs, and like, you know, like, you know, he's like, oh, what about this? And it's like, oh, look, I have something on that. Let's talk about it. So for those who are listening and not watching, what I've done is I put up this graphic that I just did about how do you correlate, you know, content metrics with your data. So when you look at monthly activities, if you've got, you know, 2,000 unique page views and 5,000 people who clicked in, and, you know, 100 people who downloaded, or, you know, 50 backlinks to the thing, like, all of those are marketing metrics, or metrics you probably track from a community or a content perspective. But the question is, which one of those lead to actual people downloading and trying the software?
Yeah.
And, you know, based on this, what you'd probably say is, just on the number of unique views, blog 3 is the most popular blog. So obviously that is the one that you would say you want more of that content. But in this case, blog 1 has way more downloads than blog 3. So people who actually tried the software, more people did it to the one that appears to be like less, you know, popular. And so,
and that's not to say like blog 3 isn't valuable. It's just like,
it's different.
They're solving different problems.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's different.
Yep.
It's different. And I think that's where, you know, from an overall perspective, right? I think we have to evolve our thinking. And one of the things that I've been really kind of harping on is there is so much focus on metrics that are vanity stats, right? It could be the number of, you know, people who visited the blog. It could be the number of people who joined your Slack channel. You know, the number of GitHub stars. I hate GitHub stars, by the way. I hate GitHub stars. But all of those are vanity metrics.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And like, it's not bad to track them, but like, I think the key for me is like, what's your primary metrics, and like, and why are you tracking them? Because I think what you're tracking, and like, you're gonna have the biggest impact on like where you're putting your time, I think affects kind of the quality, or like what you're doing with that content too. And like, you could do something that's like really salesy and like really going to push hard to convert people, and it's just going to like turn people away, or push people to like sign up for GitHub stars and forget that like your community isn't growing, but like it's getting a ton of hits and growing, but like it's not helping much.
Yeah. It's really about connecting the dots with what matters to the business and what the strategy is. You know, there's a lot of companies whose strategy is Fortune 500 companies. That's who we want to sign up for. And, you know, there's other companies who are like, we just want like individual users. Those two have completely different strategies and ways to measure the effectiveness of what you're doing. And you need to figure that out and then align content and everything else towards that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I developers at Fortune 500 companies are like the golden goose for everybody. Everyone trying to like sell new products or whatever, and it's super hard to reach them. They're expensive.
It is.
They're inundated with everybody trying to get their attention. But yeah, but I get it. It makes sense. I get why. Those are the big whales you want to go after.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to be very careful of it and kind of balance it with other prospects.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big, interesting things is, as you start to explore, any one of those, you risk alienating the others, and that could be okay.
Yeah, that's true. Interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah,
Right?
it just depends. It depends. Yeah, I totally agree. I know when I was at MongoDB, I've always felt like I had to walk this fine line because we wanted to show MongoDB. I think people's perception of it was it's not for banks or governments, and we tried to show we are enterprisey and we're less just a fun toy for a developer, but we also still wanted to court our existing indie developers working on startups or just hacking at home. And it's a fine line. You're talking to two different audiences, and sometimes if you have a team that's big enough, you can divide and conquer and start talking to both those audiences all at once. But if you're a solo DevRel content developer at a company, you may not have the bandwidth to do that, and you kind of have to pick.
Yeah, I think you focus on what matters the most to the company, where your target is. If you're gonna focus on banking, for instance, especially in the database space, there are certain things from a compliance perspective, a security perspective, that are very specific to those sort of customers, which may not matter as much to your websites or gaming companies or fill in the blank companies. And so I think it's just making sure that you're aligned to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for me, it goes back to my point about if you're in DevRel or you're a new company or you're nervous about your role in DevRel, I think it's more important than ever to make sure that you're aligning with what the business cares about, and talking to that audience and making adjustments if you need to.
Yeah. So Joe, how did you get into DevRel in the beginning?
Actually, yeah, I'll give you the quick version. So I taught at a boot camp in Honolulu, Hawaii for a couple of years, which I loved. And it was one of the top 10 best developer boot camps. It was really fun. I ended up, I was working 80, 90 hours a week. I ended up burning out. And then I started working for a large e-commerce company that sells lots of TVs and refrigerators on Black Friday here in the US, and became one of the front-end technical leads for that site. But I really missed teaching. So I started to do live coding, YouTube videos, blogging, speaking at conferences, that sort of thing. And I was trying to just spread the word about how cool this big blue e-commerce company was, and the cool work we were doing to everybody. And my boss got mad at me because I was spending more time speaking at tech conferences and writing content than doing my job as a front-end technical lead, which totally fine. I get it. But it was just this burning feeling in my gut that I need to go out and just talk about these things I was learning and working on. So I decided to find a job where I could do that full time, and that's where I started. I got picked up into DevRel. It helped to have been building an audience prior to getting to DevRel. And if anyone's listening to this and thinking about getting into DevRel too, I think you can get in with no experience. I don't think you need to be good at public speaking to be good at DevRel, but for me, it did help to have a little bit of community building and plan a couple hackathons, do some writing, get some traction at some conferences, that sort of thing, to kind of get started with it.
What do you think is the personality from a DevRel perspective that people are most likely to succeed with?
I think the perception is it's people like you and me who are good in front of a camera and can speak good, or not afraid to
I suck at that, but that's okay.
I know. Me too, honestly. But I have so many friends in DevRel who have 20 followers on Twitter or on YouTube, don't have a YouTube or online presence at all. I think it's a misconception because people see us, and I think that they think that you need to be loud to do that. But you think you can be successful in other ways too. I think there's tons of people behind the scenes who are making amazing content that is moving the needle, but aren't as as much of a face. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's the difference between DevRel and influencer. Or influencer
DevRel,
agree. Right? It's kind of like that idea of you have the person who's the face, but then you have the people who are actually doing all the work, right? Actually producing the content. And I mean, when you're a smaller company, you're doing a little of everything,
of course.
But I think as you get bigger, there are people who are going to write technical documentation, tutorials, give training classes, etc.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I think those people should be in there. I think if you're looking to get into DevRel today, if I'm evaluating like a junior DevRel person, I definitely like to see some sort of effort into either content creation. It doesn't have to be big, but I want to see like you writing or like doing some sort of community building or planning some sort of events in the tech space or something, or involved with an existing open source project. Like I want to see some sort of like interest in that area if you're going to be coming into DevRel. And again, not to say that you don't have to. I think lots of DevRel folks have come in without having that experience, and I think it's still possible. But especially in this labor market, I think it'd be good to have like a little bit to show to kind of come in.
Yeah.
What would you like? What do you look for if you were going to hire a junior DevRel person tomorrow? What kind of things would you be looking for?
Number one thing that I go look for is, can I find them online?
Yeah. I mean, I always get a Google first, of course.
You know, like
exactly.
I mean, so I've hired a couple of DevRel people with very limited experience, just based on what I could find in GitHub and YouTube. Like I've said to recruiters, like I'm going to hire that person right there without even interviewing them, just based on like what I've been able to see. And some of these people only have like 3 or 4 things out there.
Yeah.
But if you could find them and you're like, wow, I really like the passion or how they presented something, it really goes a long way to showcasing that. So there's that. But by the way, did you ever think about like, so I know like you were in between roles. Did you ever think about not doing DevRel as your next role?
Of course. Yeah. I started applying for just doing like database or front end work again. I did, because I have to say, like, I mean, the job market did make me a little nervous, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I actually ended up doing the exact opposite. I ended up hyper-focusing on data and database-related developer content. I ended up getting 5 job offers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
I know. I feel super lucky. It turns out getting laid off means you can full-time work on interviewing and meeting and networking with people.
Doesn't make it any less scary, but you know.
No. And like once things like started moving, I've realized like there's still a massive need in this space. And the other thing I've learned too with this like tech downturn is like the big companies aren't hiring, but smaller companies are hiring like crazy right now. A lot of smaller companies are like using this time to like kind of build some amazing teams really quickly. And I didn't have any issues with it. And also, I mean, non-technical, like non-software-based companies, like e-commerce companies or healthcare companies, of course, are still hiring like crazy right now. But I did at the beginning, and then I quickly saw that there's still a massive need for like this weird niche I'm in. And then I just moved full-time into looking in there, and there was a million opportunities, which it shocked me. And I admit, I come from a place of like, I have an established network. I have an existing audience I could like lean on. I wasn't starting from scratch on this. I had like a lot of experience in the space. And I may have a different experience if I was like a brand new like college graduate coming out in the space and kind of looking to get into it. But for me, it was it made me feel way more comfortable.
Fair enough. So you joined Tinybird though recently, like you said. And coming into that though, you didn't necessarily know their technology. So how do you come up to speed quick on something like that?
Yeah, actually, this round of interviewing, I did a lot more due diligence on kind of like evaluating the products. So I didn't do this until like the 3rd or 4th round of interviews for the company I was at, but I did go through at least their getting started guide for each of them. So like signing up for their, cloud service or whatever, and then going through whatever they're recommending as their getting started service to just like evaluate, is this like, how mature is this? How seriously are they taking developer content? How smooth was the process? How many button clicks did it take for me to get something working? And the easier and shorter time it took me to do that, the more impressed I was with those companies. But having like, even just going through an initial setup, it doesn't, I still don't consider myself an expert. I'm only on week 2 of this new job at Tinybird, which by the way has been amazing. But like it gives you at least enough like jargon or like kind of words to use when you're interviewing to make you sound like you know more about the product than you do. Or at least for me, having like being able to articulate plans of how I want to get up to speed or what I think I might need to get done, or like at least come up with some high level ideas for how you would improve the product, which usually impressed interviewers to have like bringing to the table some ideas or kind of thinking about it, or how you fit into their market play and how you like understand the product.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard, but I definitely like at least poke around a little bit if you're like in the interviewing mode right now.
Oh yeah. So I mean, what's interesting about Tinybird is there's a lot of open source projects that they've contributed to, and I know they're pretty big in the ClickHouse community.
Yeah, so, it's built on top of ClickHouse.
Yeah, so there's a lot of like overlap there. And so that'll be interesting to see, what you come up with there.
Yeah, I am too. Like, we're still working on positioning and kind of like figuring out what we're doing here. I think part of my play here too is to just kind of figure out like what is going to work and kind of do some experimenting on kind of marketing. Tinybird, for those who don't know, it's a big company in Spain. It was founded in Spain. There's a big audience out there too, and like it's growing here in the US. But like, is our marketing play going to be different in the US? Like, what are the needs of users who are interested in here? And like, we're trying some A/B tests to see like what kind of content might be working and kind of working and just seeing what's working or not right now. Like, for example, we're working on like real-time analytics versus real-time database. Like, is that a different market segment? Is one clicking more? Does one open up more like opportunities for use cases? And like, if so, like, are those use cases going to be a good fit for like actually becoming paid users eventually? But we're a new team. They're expanding a lot, so it's just like a lot of us just kind of, we're going to throw some darts at the wall for a little bit, see what happens, and then try to iterate and move quickly on it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, Joe, we've got a little bit of time left before we need to send you on your way to your next meeting. So we're going to go through some rapid fire questions. Okay.
Great.
So I have 137 questions. Let's see how many we can get through. All right.
I'm very good at interviewing right now, so this is great.
Oh, good. Yeah, you're in practice.
Yeah.
So, what's your first Linux distribution?
Oh, like the first one I ever used?
Yeah.
My dad was a software engineer, so we always grew up with with Linux. And I think the first one may have been either Mint or Ubuntu. I don't even know if it was pre-Ubuntu, but the one I'm most comfortable with and have been used for like 15 years is Ubuntu.
Okay. What's your most used open source tool nowadays?
Oh, there's so many. I feel like Visual Studio Code is still huge. And then this is a weird one. I use a tool called Rambox, which is like it like puts all your messaging apps all in one window, which is really nice. I end up using that one a ton these days. I'm trying to think of like an open source tool.
Or maybe the open source tool you couldn't live without. Like you just use it on a regular basis.
Have you ever heard of curl before? Have you ever heard of Git
Of
before?
course I've heard of curl.
I use those quite a bit too.
Yeah. Who hasn't heard of curl?
Oh, actually, you know what I have been using and I'm most excited about? It's nothing to do with databases. I bought a new house last January and I got really into smart home stuff, but I got into a open source project called Home Assistant, which is it's amazing. I'm obsessed with it. I think it's great. I think it's amazing. So anyway, if anyone's into home, like smart home automation, like check out Home Assistant. It's amazing.
Well, I just did a interview with Patrick McFadden from DataStax, and he was talking about Home Assistant as well because he's into that. And he actually used it to tell when his laundry had stopped because the kids would never take the laundry out of the washer, and so it nags the kids.
I literally just did that automation last weekend. I put a vibration sensor on the back of the dryer, and then I set it so like if you actually knock it, it won't go off. But it has to be like it tracks the cycles, and then it waits a couple minutes after it finishes.
All right. So when you were way back, when you were in high school, college, whatever, what was your first job?
In college, I did IT tech support, which shout out to those folks. They severely underpaid and have a horrible, hard job. And then my first internship in college was for the Toro company.
Like the lawnmowers?
The lawnmower and snowblower company. Yeah. Which was, it wasn't great. It was fine. I ended up, they were migrating to Windows 7 at the time, so I helped with that migration and doing testing on the software to make sure it would survive the Windows 7 migration. So that was a couple years ago, though.
Okay. If you weren't doing tech work, what would you be doing?
Oh, this is easy. I'd be a barber. I would be a barber.
You'd be a barber.
Yeah,
okay,
that's
a barber.
First. Yeah, it's like you work with your hands. It can never be outsourced. You just get to like hang out. It's like feels like kind of artistic a little bit. You get to like chat with, like hang out with people. Yeah, it's just like steady. It's a good, like, honorable profession that I think is like kind of fun and would be.
You ever think about becoming the open source barber?
Oh my god, that'd be amazing.
Like you could do a show where you cut people's hair while you talk about open source.
I was imagining like a Flowbee attached to a 3D printer or something.
Oh, that'd be awesome too, right? That could be great. You know, if you remember the Flowbees, good on you. They were a hot pandemic item. Just saying.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I'm just saying they were a hot pandemic item. Yes. So Flowbees, everyone, look it up if you don't know what we're talking about. What's the last book you read?
Oh boy, I have to say, I think I forgot how to read over the pandemic.
What?
My attention span became a lot harder. But the last book I actually read,
or audiobook. You could do an audiobook if you.
That's true. I am reading the People's History of the United States on podcast. But the last book I read was a book club I ran on the business value developer relations. Which was always great. I've actually run that book club a couple times. I love doing it if I have a team of juniors on my team and kind of just like having a team discussion to kind of align on like general terminology and like industry practices and just kind of discussing what works and doesn't work for our specific business.
Okay. So Joe, you go to conferences, right? You've spoken at conferences, I assume. Yes, of course, because you can't make it to the list of top 100 DevRel people and not do that. So, you know, realistically, when you're there and they're like, okay, Joe, you're going to go up on stage, you're going to keynote this 10,000 person conference. What music should we play as you walk up to the stage? What is that?
Yeah, I know, like your John Cena like walkout music.
Yes,
I've actually thought about this. There's a couple. Wrecking Ball by Miley Cyrus.
Okay,
Miley Cyrus. I think it'd be really fun. Came in like a wrecking ball. The other one I thought would be funny is Fergalicious.
Okay. Yeah,
I thought that'd be really fun. But honestly, there's a song by Oasis, which I'm not a big Oasis guy, but it's called, I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but it's called F-Word in the Bushes. But it has the hardest intro, and like no one's really heard it. Because I'm really like want like a John Cena, like, you know, you want like a strong.
Okay. Fair enough.
It has that same energy, but like no one really knows it. I don't know. Go check it out. F-Word. Fucking in the Bushes if you're interested.
Hey, you know, you could go for the shock value, right? You know, you might as well.
It doesn't even swear. It just like hits hard. It's just like if I was walking out of a sports stadium and everyone was screaming, like I just want like, oh yeah, it hits like that.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks for hanging out with me today. We only got through, a dozen questions, not even that many. So there's still 120-something left to go.
We'll have to come on again and we'll finish the list up.
Yeah, we'll finish that list. But, Joe, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Likewise, Matt, this has been amazing. And thanks to everyone. If anyone wants more, follow me on Twitter at JoeKarlsson1, or if you like weird little videos on TikTok, I do things there too. And if you're interested in setting up a real-time database, check out Tinybird. It's amazing.
All righty. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe, everybody. See you next time.
Don't forget.